LBC weather, more rain, sometimes heavy, especially for northern England and parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland later. Drier elsewhere, that with a low of 5. Tomorrow, well, there's a mixture of sunny spells and showers, particularly in the north. Plenty of warm sunshine, though, further south. A high of 24. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Serena Farrow.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, very good evening. It is 3 minutes past 8 here on LBC. Now, if you've been listening to us over the past 2 or 3 weeks, you'll know that we've spent a lot of time doing hour-long interviews with leadership candidates, predominantly from the Conservative Party, because there were so many of them. I interviewed 9 of the 10 different candidates. Obviously, Boris Johnson was the omission from that. I still live in hope. But maybe after last Saturday in Birmingham, that hope has been extinguished with some of the questions that I put, but I don't know. But we met Sir Ed Davey last week. He's standing for the leadership of the Liberal Democrats. His opponent, because there are only 2 candidates in this race, is Jo Swinson. And Jo joins me now. She's going to be here for the next hour. If you'd like to watch us, you can do so on our website at lbc.co.uk, our Facebook page, and on our Twitter feed. Jo, warm welcome to you.
Good to be here, Iain.
We're going to be taking some questions from callers after 8:30, but you have a big announcement to make, don't you? It could not be bigger.
I understand it's a birthday present for you, Iain.
It is.
So Ed and I are going to come on your show and do a head-to-head debate, and it's going to be on your birthday in 2 weeks' time.
It is on the 15th of July. So I'm looking forward to that. Now, you've been doing quite a lot of head-to-heads.
We have.
Now, I haven't seen any of them, but are they all very good?
Quite a lot of them are online. You could go, you could watch, you know.
I could, but let's face it, I'm doing so many of the Tory hustings, I'm a bit debated out.
Yeah.
But are they all good-natured, or is there a little bit of friction between you two?
I mean, it is pretty good-natured. A contrast with the other leadership campaign that is on at the moment. The Lib Dems...
fairly good-natured.
Well, not quite so sure. Among the Lib Dems, this is very much a contest between friends, and Ed and I have known each other for 20 odd years. We also are a party that's very united, so it doesn't really feel like it's some kind of battle for the soul of the Lib Dems, and the party's very optimistic and positive about the direction we're going in, and it's more about, so who is just the right leader for us right now with this set of circumstances.
A Lib Dem friend of mine said to me, well, it's a bit like Tweedledum and Tweedledee, this contest, because they don't really disagree on very much, which kind of makes it a little bit boring. So how do you differentiate yourself from your opponent?
Well, we don't disagree massively on policy, and you can argue that that's boring, or you can say, look, that's a party that's comfortable in its own skin, and that there's a lot of unity amongst what we think. The climate emergency needs to be tackled with urgency. We need to reform our economy, and I've been very much talking about harnessing the technological revolution that we're going through, and of course we're totally in one mind about getting a people's vote to stop Brexit. So, I mean, that's very much, agreement. In terms of differentiation, I mean, I think I'm better placed to reach out to new voters, particularly using the media and social media. I think my media profile is strong. I've got, across different platforms, social media following that is high profile. And I think that particularly helps reaching out to younger voters, and indeed also reaching out across the country. I mean, I've lived and worked in Scotland, in Yorkshire and in London, so a bit more of an understanding of, challenges right across the country. And then also reaching out across traditional party lines. I'm not a tribal politician. If you speak to people in Westminster, you will understand that. You'll know that that's true. And right now, that's something which is really, really helpful, because it's a lot about cross-party working to deliver the campaign for a people's vote, and also about expanding the Liberal Democrats. We saw Chuka Umunna joining us just a couple of weeks ago, and that's been a great boost to the party. The party has warmly welcomed Chuka, and obviously if we want to grow the party further, we've got Brecon and Radnorshire by-election coming up, and hoping to get Jane Dodds elected as an MP, and have more conversations to bring more people to the Lib Dem cause.
Chuka, he's not a Liberal though, is he?
Well, he is very much Liberal-minded, and he's a social democrat. And
there are quotes from him though, absolutely ridiculing the Liberal Democrats. I could read them out to you, but you could. But
let's face it, we do operate within a political system where we do criticise our opposing parties, and that's understood. What's important is that he's taken what was a difficult decision to leave his party, and he has put stopping Brexit as absolutely the priority in the national interest, and joined the Liberal Democrats. And he actually did initially join the Lib Dems before he joined the Labour Party, way back when he was a lot younger. So he obviously has had those kind of strong liberal values.
Apart from Brexit, what has he got in common with you?
Well, I'll tell you something. He also was the chair of the all-party group on electoral reform, which, if you could tell me what's a more Lib Dem type cause than changing the voting system, I'm not quite sure what you would...
I just can't imagine him wearing sandals.
Maybe you can't have everything, Don't know if he grew a beard either. But.
Right, let's come on to a very substantial subject, because a lot of people have been tweeting me throughout the course of the day when I told them you were coming on the programme, and said, well, pin her down on what she would do if there was a hung parliament after the next election. Typical example here, Chris says, can you ask Jo, would she form a coalition government with Labour after the next general election? Don't let her not answer.
Not with a Corbyn Labour Party. Corbyn is a Brexiteer. I think he would be
up to a point, Lord Copper. Lady Copper.
Seriously, I can't see any other explanation for his total reluctance to agree with what his party members are urging him to do, despite the electoral devastation that it's been wreaking on the Labour Party. What other explanation is there other than that he actually genuinely wants Brexit to happen? So
you rule out a coalition with a Corbyn-led Labour Party. Do you rule out a coalition with a Boris Johnson-led Conservative Party?
Yes.
A Jeremy Hunt-led Conservative Party?
Yes.
A Hilary Benn-led Labour Party?
Well, Hilary Benn's not leading the Labour Party, is he?
Nor a Jeremy Hunt or Boris Johnson at the moment.
Yes, but the next leader of the Conservative Party is going to be Jeremy Hunt or Boris Johnson. They're in a leadership campaign now. Corbyn, they've already tried to get rid of him once. That wasn't successful, was it? He seems absolutely, stuck in there. And, for all that lots of Labour Party members are very depressed about that and the direction that he's leading the party, whether that's on economic policy or whether it's his failure to deal with anti-Semitism in the party.
The reason why we need to go further on this is because you were part of the coalition with the Conservatives from 2010 to 2015.
Sure.
Now, the justification originally for that was that, well, the country was going to, after the financial crash, there was a Greek financial crisis, we had to have a stable government, and I think Nick Clegg was absolutely 100% right to go into coalition with David, and a full coalition with David Cameron. Now, it is arguable that in the next year we are going to face as a country a similar crisis through whatever kind of Brexit happens. And even if it doesn't happen, then there will still be a crisis. So the argument then surely is that you would, for the good of the country, have to come together with other parties to form a coalition government. Otherwise, what's the point of existing as a political party?
I'm working with people across the House in almost all parties, admittedly not the DUP, to secure a people's vote to stop Brexit, because I agree, I think our country does face a huge crisis, and my assessment of that situation is if we Brexit, if we leave the European Union, particularly but not only, if we leave without a deal. So I'm absolutely up for working with people in other parties to stop Brexit and in the national interest. I think the difficulty I have is, for people who are so opposed on an issue which is so fundamental, there's just, that is something which is too damaging for our country. There is no way that we could meet on that. Now, you can still, by the way, I'm going to set out at the election, to be ambitious, for the Liberal Democrats to have no limit on what we set out to achieve. In this volatile period of politics, why shouldn't we be having Liberal Democrats leading a government and potentially even
leading a government?
Yes, absolutely.
I've heard this all my adult life, where there have been many false dawns for the Liberal Party or the Liberal Democrats or the alliance back in the 1980s. And it never actually seems to happen. Now, given the result of the European election, and it's difficult to translate European elections to general elections, but let's use that as a basis. If there was a result where maybe the Liberal Democrats, Labour, the Conservatives and the Brexit Party, in a post-no deal general election, each got around 25% of the vote. Now, clearly, your case for electoral reform would be strengthened then, because according to electoral calculus, Labour would get 237 seats seats, I think you'd get, 60, something like that, even though you'd have an identical share of the vote. But in that circumstance, we would have to have a government, wouldn't we?
Well, we always need to have a government in the country. But I don't sort of accept your kind of hypothetical, well, this is what it would absolutely look like. You're right that obviously in previous years and previous elections, there have been hopes that have sometimes then been dashed. And we saw it in the 1980s and we saw it again in 2010. I suppose what I would say is that politics feels incredibly volatile right now. So if you were to have made predictions, right, a few years ago, that you would have a Jeremy Corbyn-led Labour Party, that you would have Trump elected as President of the United States.
Jo Swinson elected as leader of the Liberal Democrats, maybe.
Well, I don't think that would have been one of the most unusual things that you could have bet on at that point. But, there's a lot of things which have happened in our politics that just defied prediction. So to suggest that we should be constrained by the kind of old rules of how it's been done, particularly when you have both of those traditionally main parties fracturing, I just don't think that we should hold ourselves back in that way. We need to set out a positive vision for a progressive liberal future for our country. And I think there's millions of people out there that want to hear that vision, want to support that vision. And that's part of the reason why 20,000 people have joined us in the last 6 weeks.
What kind of liberal are you? Are you a David Laws, Orange Booker type liberal, sort of quite pro-free market? Or are you a Simon Hughes, sort of slightly more left of centre liberal?
Oh, well, I'm not sure I would either categorise myself either as David Laws or Simon Hughes. I think there's probably quite a lot of space in between the two of them, much as I do love them both dearly. I would say I'm a radical liberal. I think we need to look at what is not working in our society and our economy, and it needs to be shaken up. I mean, the basic sort of model of capitalism that profit is elevated above everything else, I don't think that's kind of fit for purpose anymore. But I think the power of business, the ingenuity and the innovation is absolutely one that can be used for good, for positive ends within our economy. And if you look at, many responsible, enlightened businesses, that's what they're doing. Increasingly businesses are being run with a purpose and a mission, and that's integral to how they set about what it is they do. And that, to me, seems like a much more kind of 2020s sort of way of looking at the relationship between business and society, rather than this kind of 1980s model that we've kind of been living through, which has resulted in huge inequality in our society, huge problems, and kind of levels of poverty that we shouldn't have.
If you don't want to define yourself as Orange Book or whatever, who's your liberal hero?
Well, actually, one of the people who hugely inspired me was Anita Roddick. Right, so she showed that there was a different way of looking at business. She was a campaigner to her core, not afraid to take on vested interests, to not accept the way that things had always been done. And she set out an entirely new model of, business as a force for good. And many more businesses are now doing that.
But in terms of politics...
Well, I think she was political.
Well... Up to a point, but in terms of liberal politics, who inspired you to get involved in the party in the first place?
Well, one of my heroes in the Lib Dems was Shirley Williams. I always used to watch Question Time in the 1990s.
She was the first politician I ever encountered. She turned me into a Conservative.
Shirley's an absolute national treasure.
She came to my school.
I suspect you were already a Conservative,
actually.
No,
I wasn't actually. But,
and when I first joined the Lib Dems, Paddy was our leader. And, I remember, going along to the kind of Meet the Leader event that he did at conference for the Young Liberal Movement, which was the Lib Dem youth and students. And, I remember hanging on his every word. And then people like Charles Kennedy, who obviously, when I was a young candidate standing in the 2005 election and, he was party leader, he was somebody that was very influential. I learned a lot from him.
So it sounds to me as if you're a bit more of a social democrat than a Liberal Democrat in many ways, because all of the people that you've mentioned, with the exception of Paddy Ashdown, they would class themselves on the social democrat side of the party.
Well, I've mentioned three people, and there was two, one and the other. I mean, I think of myself as a Liberal Democrat. I joined the Lib Dems in 1997, and I know that there's obviously some people in the party who still very much are in the mindset of whether in the Liberals or the Social Democrats.
Yeah.
But I think that's less the case these days, because most of our membership, I mean, a large chunk of our membership has joined since 2015, and certainly, most of them have joined in the last 30 years.
Which actually makes this leadership election slightly more unpredictable than some people might think, I guess.
I think it does.
Does that cause you a little bit of nervousness?
I think it's exciting. I mean, I think having that many new members is absolutely brilliant.
Right, we need to take a break. After that, we'll have a few more questions from me, and then it's over to you. If you'd like to ask Jo Swinson a question, she's Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats at the moment, but on July the 23rd, I think is that the date that that's the same result day as the Tories are announcing their
It's true.
new leader.
So it's not inconceivable it might move by a few hours.
I'd get a day before if I were you, just to dominate the news agenda. We'll hear from more from Jo in just a moment. It's 18 minutes past 8.
This is LBC.
Get Vodafone's double data deal this summer. We're giving away double data on all pay monthly smartphones. Yes, all pay monthly smartphones. Now a huge 30 gig for the price of 15, starting at only £30 a month. Double the selfie sharing, double the playlist pumping, and double the maps mapping. To get double data, go online or in-store today. The future's exciting. Ready? Vodafone. Terms and details at vodafone.co.uk/summer. Ends 9th of July.
London. We have a problem. Our air is toxic, and driving polluting vehicles is the main cause. The air that I breathe, that my friends breathe, that my mum and dad breathe, and that you breathe, can cause lifelong diseases. But there are solutions, like making our transport greener and creating better spaces to walk and cycle.
These are just some of the ways the Mayor of London and TfL are helping to improve air quality across the capital. Find out how you can make a difference too. Search Let London Breathe. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
From director Ron Howard, Pavarotti became the global rock star. Discover the definitive story of the man behind the voice.
He lived those songs.
Can you be sure you'll hit the note?
No, that is the beauty of my profession.
It's magnificent, a beautiful tribute. Pavarotti. Book now for a one-night-only preview with Q&A and remastered 3 tenors aria in cinemas July 13th.
The M&S sale is now on with up to 50% off selected clothing, home and beauty in selected stores and online while stocks last. T's and C's apply.
Have you received financial advice to move your pension? You may need a pension check to see if you could be due thousands in compensation for the losses due to unsuitable advice. If you were advised to transfer out of your final salary pension or into a SIP, Money Redress could help. Money Redress are one of the leading claims management companies with a 5-star Trustpilot rating. Text YES to 82344. That's YES to 82344. You don't need to use a claims management company such as Money Redress to make your complaint, and there's no guarantee of a more favourable outcome if you do. You can refer your complaint to the Financial Ombudsman Service or the Financial Services Compensation Scheme for free.
This summer, Uber is sponsoring the 2019 ICC Cricket World Cup. To celebrate and say thank you, we're giving partner drivers across the UK the chance to win tickets to a match and a range of exclusive cricket goodies. To win, all you have to do is test your knowledge with a super simple cricket quiz. So if you drive with Uber, open your app now to enter, and you could be enjoying a match in the sun soon. T's and C's apply. Sun not guaranteed.
Iain Dale on LBC.
21 minutes past 8 here on LBC. You are a Scottish MP. What is your attitude to Scottish independence?
I want Scotland to stay in the United Kingdom, along with most of my constituents and most of the people in Scotland.
However, the SNP were elected in the last Scottish parliamentary election on a mandate of having another referendum. Were you Prime Minister, would you allow that referendum?
Well, no, they don't have a mandate.
Well, they do have a mandate.
No, they don't. They didn't win a majority of MSPs.
No,
they lost MSPs.
It was in their manifesto, and they're now in government.
They're now in government as a minority government.
Only just.
They're a minority.
They have more of a mandate than your party does in Scotland, and they did stand on the issue of having a second referendum.
And they lost MSPs, and they also in 2017 set out plans for IndyRef 2, and a few weeks later we had a general election. And they lost 21 MPs on the back of an election campaign that was largely fought on that issue. So to suggest that there's some kind of clamour in Scotland to have IndyRef 2, I mean, it's entirely the opposite.
Well, you say that, but you look at some of the opinion polls in recent weeks and they do show a small minority for independence. So there does seem to be a little bit of a shift.
Well, I mean... I think from speaking to people in Scotland, from looking at the way in which the SNP, when they talk about independence, have actually lost seats in the Scottish Parliament and in the UK Parliament. What people in Scotland want is they want Scotland in the UK in the EU, and to move on from this constitutional wrangling that we've now had for, best part of 7 years in Scotland, and have a government that focuses on making their lives better. Now, it's only the Liberal Democrats that are arguing for that position, because, all of the other parties are either saying we should come out the UK, we should come out the EU, we should have this endless constitutional wrangling. It's the Lib Dems that are standing up for what people in Scotland actually want.
So, but you've lost lots of seats in Scotland as well, haven't you? I mean, there were 11 Liberal Democrat MPs in Scotland. How many are there now? Two?
Four.
Okay.
I'll grant you we did have a pretty difficult election night in 2015 in Scotland and across the rest of the UK, but we did go from 1 to 4 MPs in 2017. In the European elections just gone, we got an MEP elected again. So actually, the Liberal Democrats in Scotland are on the up. And I think that is...
But you have 4 MPs in Scotland, and the Scottish National Party, I think I'm right in saying, have 35.
Yeah.
Now that should tell us something, shouldn't it, in terms of mandate?
Well, as I say, they lost 21 MPs standing on a platform of IndyRef 2. They lost 15% of the vote.
More than you do.
Yeah, but people
so they have more of a mandate for their position than you do for yours. I mean, that's the logic you're using.
We're obviously not the only party in Scotland that's standing on this position. So what you saw in the 2017 election was voters recognising that in different parts of the country they might have to vote in a different way to make sure that their view on wanting to keep Scotland in the UK would be respected. And that's why, yes, you saw the Lib Dems win seats, but you also saw the Conservatives and the Labour Party in Scotland win seats.
How come you wish to deny the people of Scotland a second referendum, and yet you're so passionate about having a second referendum on Brexit? It's because you don't agree with the result of the first one. You don't agree with but you do agree with the result of the first one in Scotland. So that's hypocritical, isn't it?
Well, I'm not going to apologise for standing up for the things that I believe in and for what most people in Scotland want, which is to keep our place in the UK and in the European Union. Clearly, the inconsistency is the SNP, who on the one hand say, well, they would like us to be in the EU, but for some reason working with our closest partners in the UK family of nations is not something they want. Or the Conservatives, who will say, rightly, that the United Kingdom is important and, we are greater than the sum of our parts. But when it comes to working in that kind of way in a union with other EU countries, suddenly they don't want to know.
That's different because the EU supposedly isn't a political union, it's an economic union. So I'm not sure the two really work as a comparison.
Well, I think the EU does achieve political ends also, not least actually the end of peace in Europe, for decades. So I think that's where the inconsistency is with those parties. And the other thing is that we had in Scotland in 2014 a really detailed blueprint for independence set out to their credit by the Scottish government. 650 pages of a white paper was produced, and that was comprehensively rejected by people in Scotland. That is very different to what happened in 2016, where there was no detailed planning laid out by the Leave campaigners, where actually even now they still can't agree on what Brexit should look like. So when we have that Brexit deal, that really does need to go to the people for a final say.
What do you say to? I mean, let's say there was another referendum, and I don't know what you want on the ballot paper in that referendum, but clearly Theresa May's deal isn't going to be on it because that's now dead. So what would you have on the ballot paper?
Well, I think we need to have a specific deliverable Brexit, and we need to have Remain on the ballot paper. So we're actually giving something for people to give their opinion on that's not a unicorn, that can actually be done. And that is
leaving with
specific.
no deal can be done.
Well, I mean, ultimately, then, what is the deal you would have? Would you never have any deal with the European Union? You know,
I don't think anybody's saying that.
Exactly. So I suppose that's where it's rather less than specific. It's a kind of plan for day one, but it's not a plan for day three, right? So, but nonetheless, I recognise that, you know, the new Prime Minister may come in, may have, a different idea of Brexit. I don't think we've necessarily had a lot of detail yet on that in the Conservative leadership race in terms of things that would actually be deliverable. But a specific Brexit deal needs to be put up against the Remain case. But Brexit means Brexit. It's just meaningless.
What do you say to people who say, well, how can you have a second referendum when you haven't actually delivered on the first? Surely that's anti-democratic.
Well, I mean, we had the 2016 referendum, and then the government went off to negotiate with the EU. And at the point at which they've done that negotiation, it makes sense for the people to be able to say, yeah, we like what you've negotiated. Absolutely, we should go ahead with that. Or, hang on a second, this doesn't quite tally up with what we thought we were voting for in 2016. No, we'd rather not have that.
But the opinion polls are not showing a huge movement here. There are some opinion polls that show that Remain would win now, just as there were actually before the 2016 referendum. But there are also many polls now, this is fairly consistent over the last couple of months, that show much bigger support for just leaving, just getting out with no deal. Now, I'm not personally advocating that we necessarily do that, but there does seem to be a slight shift in public opinion on that front.
So, I mean, let me ask you a question, Ian. You know, you're a commentator. Hang on. You speak to lots of people on your phone. Do you actually think there is a majority in this country for leaving the European Union with no deal?
I think there is a majority over people remaining. And you look at the last YouGov poll, 48% want to leave with no deal, 40% want to remain.
Well, I mean, I don't think there is a majority in the country for
leaving
with no deal.
What the polls said.
Yeah, I mean, given what that would actually mean for our public services, what it would mean for our economy, what it would mean for our security.
But I don't think people believe any of that now. They just see it all as yet again the same kind of project fear that we had before the first referendum, which didn't come to pass.
Oh, well, I mean, we have seen some pretty big impacts. I mean, anyone that's, been on holiday will know what happened to the value of the pound. You know when you actually, buy things abroad, how much less you get for the money that you change. I mean, that's been a pretty significant impact.
The economy has been very resilient. We now have the lowest unemployment since 1973, I think. And inflation has been relatively steady. Wage growth is now outpacing inflation. So, I mean, we can trace statistics one way or the other, but there hasn't been the crash that we were told there would be.
Well, we are still members of the European Union, Ian. So, in a sense, a lot of the impact has not yet been felt. Well, I don't think that is the problem. I think that is cause for optimism. Okay. I appreciate we're in a different view on that.
Right, let's. We're going to go to the calls now. So 0345 6060 973. If you'd like to put a call through to possibly the next leader of the Liberal Democrats, just one campaign promise: if you become leader of the Liberal Democrats, you're still going to come and be interviewed by me in my Edinburgh Fringe show, aren't you, on August the 2nd? That's a firm promise.
I definitely want to still come and be interviewed on your Fringe.
Oh, you said you want to?
Yes.
That's not a firm promise.
Yeah, no, I do.
Fantastic. Okay. It's 8:30. Let's get the latest news headlines from Serena Farrow.
The body of a suspected stowaway thought to have fallen from a jet has been found in a South London garden. Police believe it dropped from the landing gear of a Kenya Airways flight as it prepared to land at Heathrow Airport. The death, though, isn't being treated as suspicious. Tory leadership hopeful Jeremy Hunt says the German Chancellor has told him she's willing to look at a new Prime Minister's plans for a revised Brexit deal. But that goes against what's been said publicly by Angela Merkel and other EU leaders. And police have regained control of Hong Kong's main government building after pro-democracy protesters moved in for a brief time. Most of them, though, left the chamber by the time riot officers came. LBC weather: more rain, sometimes heavy, particularly for northern England, parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland tonight. Drier elsewhere, though, feeling still quite chilly with a low of 5 degrees.
LBC.
Psst! Did you know that Pimlico Plumbers have an utterly fabulous 24-hour service for plumbing, heating, drains, roofing, electrics, appliances, carpentry and building? Whatever your predicament, Pimlico Plumbers can send a friendly face to your door within the hour. Shh! And just between us, their work even comes with a 12-month guarantee. They aren't just any old tradesmen, they're Pimlico Plumbers, and they're always available on 0207 928 8888 or at pimlicoplumbers.com.
I think my favourite flower right now is the British stocks. You can get them in pastels through to deeper cerises and purples.
Lizzie, floral designer at Zing Flowers.
They're probably one of the most fragrant flowers that we have. They remind you of being in a British summer garden, and you just walk into a room and you can smell them. They're beautiful.
Send the best of the bunch with zingflowers.com. Same day delivery available. Conditions apply.
Zing Flowers. Amazing every time.
The world of financial investments can be complex and intimidating, which is why you trusted the experts at your bank. But they let you down and sold you an investment that lost money. At Goodwin Barrett, we'll help you through the process of making a complaint and winning the compensation you deserve. Right now, Goodwin Barrett are offering a quick investment assessment to discover just how much you could be owed. To start yours, text GOOD to 60777. Text GOOD to 60777 now.
And now, before the next programme, a short poem written and read for you today by the celebrated poet Trevor Jones, simply called Life. Who knows what it really means?
Means. Beans. Oh, delicious Heinz beans on piping hot buttered toast. Now that's poetry.
Dreaming of the unique taste of Heinz beans with no added sugar makes it better.
There's nothing like meeting face-to-face. And there's nothing like Zoom to make that happen. Zoom lets you connect and do business across town or around the world. Zoom ties together all of your communication needs into one easy platform for video conferencing, phone calls, group chat, webinars, and your conference rooms. Connect easily from anywhere, your mobile phone, your laptop, or conference room. Zoom is how business gets done. Get your free account at zoom.com today. Meet happy with Zoom.
Leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Tweet at LBC.
It's 8:34 here on LBC. Right, Jo Swinson is with us. If you'd like to watch us, you can do so on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk, the Facebook page or Twitter feed. So, time for your questions. 0345 6060 973. If you don't get through first time, do keep trying. Robert is in Glasgow. Hi, Robert.
Good evening, Iain. How are you?
I'm very well. What would you like to ask Jo?
Well, Jo, I'm a constituent of yours, and I voted for you in the last election in 2017, which you won. However, my definition of liberal is willing to respect or accept opinions different from one's own. I don't find your position terribly liberal. In fact, I think it's illiberal.
What are you referring to in particular?
Well, we voted to leave the European Union, and if you were liberal, you would accept the opinion.
Well, first of all, Robert, thank you for voting for me, and you know, you and the many others in Eastern Bartonshire who put their faith in me to be re-elected as the MP for Eastern Bartonshire, and appreciate, obviously, we have a difference of opinion over the issue about our place within the European Union, and I can absolutely...
Could I ask you just to acknowledge something which I don't hear acknowledged and really needs to be acknowledged? I mean, do you accept that the European Union is itself a complete mess?
I think there's things I would change about it, but I wouldn't accept that it's a complete mess. I mean, no institution is perfect.
They can't even agree who should be the commissioner after, I think, 3 or 4 days now.
Well,
I mean, this is a shambles, is it not?
I mean, it wouldn't be the first institution that took some days to, you know, come to agreements about who should lead them, and so, you know, I don't think we should, we should sort of assume, therefore, that because they're taking a bit of time to get that right, that the institution itself, we're sort of better off out. I mean, I don't think any institution is perfect. I certainly look at the Westminster Parliament at the moment, and I'm sure many people roll their eyes at what that looks like in terms of whether or not that's a shambles. And I would say the same in terms of Holyrood, in terms of local councils. I mean, every institution has its problems, but ultimately the European Union has delivered prosperity. It has helped us to secure peace across our continent, and I think we're better off working with others to tackle international challenges like the climate emergency. I can appreciate you disagree on that, and sometimes we just have to be able to agree to disagree.
Do you find, though, I mean, Robert is a Lib Dem voter. He's one of the 25%, presumably, of Lib Dem voters who voted to leave the EU. I saw a poll on Mark Pack's Lib Dem Newswire the other day that showed that only 3% of Lib Dem members are actually in favour of leaving the EU. So there's a bit of a disconnect between voters and members here, which is not unusual in political parties. What do you do to bridge that divide? Because you can't afford to lose the 25% of Lib Dem voters who do support Brexit.
I mean, I think it's just about, we just have to be straightforward, right? I'm not going to change my view on whether it's a good thing to leave the European Union. I fundamentally think it's not. And I recognise that other people like yourself, Robert, very genuinely hold a different view. And I will always, as the Member of Parliament, be available. I speak to people in constituency surgeries, out and about in the constituency, and some of whom agree with me on this, some of whom agree on other things. Similarly, in the constituency of East Bartonshire, there are differences of opinion about whether Scotland should stay in the United Kingdom or not, and it may well be that we agree on that particular matter but disagree on our membership of the EU. And I just think we need to be able to disagree with one another sometimes from a position of respect. And I absolutely appreciate that people have different opinions, but it doesn't mean that I will necessarily agree with them.
OK, Robert, thank you. Talking of respect, Bones on Twitter says, is Iain thick, or does he just go brain dead when it comes to Brexit? Maybe he's really excited to see millions of lives destroyed due to this vote and further nonsense propaganda. That'd be it, yeah, obviously. I mean, do you get frustrated by the level of discourse on both sides here, where people have such entrenched positions they cannot see that there is another side to it? You may not disagree with it, but you have to... I mean, I totally respect your view that we should stay in the EU. I can understand your arguments. I just happen to disagree with them. But I'm not going to say that you're brain dead or thick.
Yeah, I do think that this is important for our public debate, and I think it's something we've got less good at in recent years. There's been much more polarisation of debate. Social media often leads to echo chambers, and I don't think it's helpful, because it's almost as if you sort of end up putting a halo or horns on somebody. I agree with them on that thing, therefore I must agree with them on everything, or we disagree on that, so everything they say must be nonsense. And I mean, I would take the view that there's people I agree with or disagree with on things. I mean, Nicola Sturgeon and I disagree on independence, but when it comes to whether or not she's a feminist and fighting for equality, I think absolutely agree with her on that.
That's the thing. If you draw a sort of Venn diagram, if you think back to our maths classes when we were 14, you will find, I mean, I suspect that if you went through all Lib Dem policy, you would say, yeah, I probably agree with about 85% of it. You're not going to agree with 100% of your own party's policy. And you and I would probably, if we crossed over, probably about 50% of things. Well, that's a start, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think actually being able to find those points of agreement is quite important. And it's powerful in politics, because that's how you get stuff done.
Let's see if we can find a point of agreement with Stephen, who's a first-time caller in Southampton. Hello, Stephen.
Hello.
Hi, what would you like to ask Jo?
Hi, so I'm a Lib Dem member in Southampton, so I get a vote in this election. Both you and Ed seem very good. I think I'd be happy whoever wins. But environment is a big... No, I think they're both very good. I wouldn't necessarily be pleased with anyone. I wasn't a big fan of Tim Farron, for instance. But
controversial.
Specifically with... back to my point. My main priority is the environment, and specifically ending our reliance on fossil fuels as quickly as possible. What role do you think nuclear power has to play in that?
Well, we currently get some of our energy from nuclear power stations, and they will continue for the foreseeable future. But I personally don't think we should be investing in new nuclear at this point. I think we need to focus investment on renewables. I think we need to be very ambitious about getting to a situation where our energy comes from renewables in its entirety, and therefore
that's not actually possible for the UK. So I've done a master's degree in physics, and there's a brilliant book that I'd recommend to anyone called Sustainable Energy Without the Hot Air. It's free to download. It's used as a course text on University of Southampton, and even with fairly generous assumptions, you can't generate 100% of the UK's energy demand from renewables alone. We absolutely should obviously have renewables as much as possible. I think that's something that everyone would agree on, but a lot of people seem to be anti-nuclear for some ideological reasons, for instance. And it's just a case of if you've got the trade-off.
Let me just cut in there, Stephen, because Ed Davey is a bit pro-nuclear, isn't he, as far as I understand it?
Well, when he was Energy Secretary, clearly he gave the green light to.
But surely nuclear energy. If we're talking about climate change, nuclear energy is very clean because it's not very hardly at all carbon intensive. So why on earth wouldn't you support a form of energy that actually helps save the planet?
Well, I still think we have incomplete answers to what to do with the waste at the end of the cycle, and that I know there's a lot of good research work that happens in terms of decommissioning, not least what's happening in a place like Dounreay. But I've made a note of the pamphlet or book that Stephen recommends to go and have a look at it. But I think we need to be very ambitious. I mean, technology is changing all the time, and we need to be able to set that ambition and go and deliver it. And part of that is about reducing our overall energy consumption and greater efficiency and smarter use of energy, and part of that is about driving this renewables revolution. And clearly, the need for electricity as we move to more electric vehicles is going to increase the demands for that type of electricity. But I'll certainly take a look at what you suggest, Stephen, but my instinct is that we should be more ambitious on renewable energy generation, and that nuclear can detract from that, because once it's built, it's having to take up that investment and have a long lifespan.
So, Stephen, has this conversation influenced your vote?
I mean, I still think both Jo or Ed would be good. I think it's tipped me slightly more towards Ed, but at the same time, there are things where I think Jo is better than Ed, so it's a case of weighing up which advantages.
Get off that fence, Stephen.
I'm not quite as bad as Corbyn yet, but I've got 3 weeks to make up my mind. I'm not going to make a decision before I need to.
Stephen,
nice to speak to you, Stephen.
Thank you very much. Well, if you lose by one, you'll know it was Stephen.
Well, not certainly. He says he hasn't quite decided yet.
But he's tipping that way, isn't he? Anyway, we'll take more of your calls in just a second with Jo Swinson. It's coming up to 8:45.
Mair, Monday to Friday from 4 p.m.
How many one-to-one interviews will your candidate do during this election? I can't answer that. I mean, I think that... Well, let me ask you another question. Will he resign if he fails to deliver Brexit by October the 31st? Well, I think Boris has been absolutely clear. No, he hasn't.
Mair, Monday to Friday from 4 p.m. LBC.
Psst! Did you know that Pimlico Plumbers have an utterly fabulous 24-hour service for plumbing, heating, drains, roofing, electrics, appliances, carpentry and building? Whatever your predicament, Pimlico Plumbers can send a friendly face to your door within the hour. Shh! And just between us, their work even comes with a 12-month guarantee. They aren't just any old tradesmen, they're Pimlico Plumbers, and they're always available on 0207 928 8888 or at pimlicoplumbers.com.
So, Mark told me about Hiring Hub, the best kept secret in recruitment, he said.
Yeah?
They help you find quality candidates and fill professional jobs fast. Gets great reviews too.
So, you're going to go for it?
Is he single?
Not with Mark, with Hiring Hub.
I posted an IT job a few days ago, interviewing 4 people tomorrow.
Want to fill professional jobs faster? Search Hiring Hub and post your job today.
Is he though? Single?
Rosa.
This summer, Uber is sponsoring the 2019 ICC Cricket World Cup. To celebrate and say thank you, we're giving partner drivers across the UK the chance to win tickets to a match and a range of exclusive cricket goodies. To win, all you have to do is test your knowledge with a super simple cricket quiz. So if you drive with Uber, open your app now to enter, and you could be enjoying a match in the sun soon. T's and C's apply. Sun not guaranteed.
You can get some pretty good deals for £1, like a scratch card, and you could win a fortune. But you probably won't. You'll just end up with a colourful piece of card and silver scratchings all over your floor. For a better deal, head to Costa Coffee and get some delicious toast for just £1 when you buy any Medio or Massimo hot drink or expertly handcrafted flat white before 11 a.m. The Coffee Plus menu from Costa Coffee. Visit costa.co.uk for full terms and participating stores.
Set for Life is the new game from the National Lottery where you can win 10 grand every month for 30 years. So go smash this month, next month, and make every month amazing. Play new Set for Life Mondays and Thursdays.
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Amazing starts here. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Let's hear it for Ozzy, the nature-loving pug. He thought he'd get a buzz out of eating a bumblebee in the garden. Ouch! Oh. Luckily, his family didn't get stung, because Pets in a Pickle had little Ozzy covered. And now he's back in the garden, chasing butterflies. Phew! For pet insurance policies as unique as they are, get a free quote today at petsinapickle.co.uk.
Iain Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
8:47. More of your questions to Jo Swinson. Catherine is in Romford. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, Iain. Hi, Jo.
Hello.
Hi, Jo. I'd like to ask you about your opinion on the future direction of the EU. I know that in the European Parliament, the Liberal Democrat Party is part of the Renew Europe group. That's one of the 8 groups in the European Parliament. And my understanding is that the Renew Europe group is pro-closer EU political integration, sort of a federal Europe, a United States of Europe, if you like. So I'd like to know your opinion on that.
I think the European Union has been a huge success story, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of what it has delivered for securing peace on our continent.
Isn't that NATO
and our value.
That's done that?
Well, I think the European Union has been pretty instrumental in linking together nations that had been ravaged by conflict and making it, through economic cooperation, make it really inconceivable that these nations would take up arms against one another again. And equally, if you look at the expansion into Eastern European states and indeed the foundation stone of the peace process in Northern Ireland. I mean, I when I went to Kosovo, for example, and spoke to people about the experiences in the Balkans, and it is so hard to see when people have been through such trauma, how the communities can start to come together. But actually the idea of being able to do so under the umbrella of the European Union as neighbours is actually what the framework that kind of makes that possible. And so I think that is hugely important, as well as economic prosperity, as well as looking at dealing with international challenges like the climate emergency or the rise of big technological companies that have huge control over our lives. Who is going to keep them in check and stand up for consumers? Well, it's the European Union acting on the basis of a market of 500 million people that is able to do that through things like GDPR, and that ends up becoming the world standard. So we're able to do so much more together. And, obviously within Renew Europe, there are a variety of different political parties, not all of which will agree on absolutely everything. But I do think that we need to reform Europe. There's definitely things which are inefficient about the way it operates. The kind of constant trekking to Strasbourg makes no sense. But I think as a political project, the EU is hugely successful, and we should be looking to make sure that it is strengthened and that we as Britain play an absolutely leading role within it, because we have huge influence as a leading player at the top table.
Do you think that there should be a formal United States of Europe, a federal union?
No, that wouldn't be my view. I do think that where we're able to take...
But it would be the view of most of the other members of this new grouping, wouldn't it?
Well, and as I say, we will agree on many things. We might not agree on everything. I do think where European states are able to take common positions on global issues, then that is very powerful. And we've seen that on issues like the Iran nuclear deal and so on. But that, I think, is best done by governments coming together and agreeing.
Catherine, quick response from you.
Hi there. I'm not sure that you've really whether you've answered my question, because I'd like to know if you agree with that core policy of a closer political union of Federal Europe and United States of Europe, because I think that you do have to be honest with the British public if that's going to be the policy of the Liberal Democrat Party. I think you need to make that clear to people that you support the United States of Europe and why you support that.
Well, I don't support that. I support us working within the European Union, having a
why
key...
Why isn't there a new Europe group then? I don't really understand. There are 7 other groups that you could join.
Well, it's the group with most Liberal parties in it, and where we obviously share... We share many policies, and but any of these groups are bringing together parties from different countries that will not agree on everything. We are very pro-European, and obviously we want to be working closely with our EU partners. And as Britain, we've got an excellent deal because we have vetoes and opt-outs and the rebate, which means that we get a seat at the top table. We're incredibly influential, and we also have this sort of bespoke position, which means that we can stay out of things that we don't want to be a part of. And I think that's an example of how the EU has actually managed to be flexible to accommodate different members.
Someone texted to point out that NATO bombing stopped the Balkan War, not the EU. Simon says, great interview with Jo. I profoundly disagree with her view on Brexit, but she comes across as very likeable and honest. Damn it, some of these Remainers are actually all right, aren't they? Luke is in Belfast. Luke, I'm coming to visit you tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Oh, brilliant. You'll have a small audience for the Tory membership. I'm a Liberal Democrat.
Luke, we can't hear you. We're going to come back to you. I'm afraid it's a terrible line. Let's go to Phil in Putney. Phil?
Oh, good evening, Jo. Good evening, Ian. Well, I've always voted Labour in the past, but being Jewish, I'm obviously not going to vote for a Corbyn-led Labour government. Well, and so I'm seriously thinking about joining the Lib Dems, but one of the things I would like to know is what your policy is going to be over a universal credit, which in my mind has been a total disaster the way it's been rolled out, and 2, these work capability assessments, which have been given to 2 private contractors who I know are under targets to fail as many people as possible. Also, with the mandatory considerations, I have a friend who works in the DWP who tells me that they're under heavy pressure just to agree with what the healthcare professional has said.
Okay, well, let's put those questions to Jo.
Sure. So, first of all, nice to speak to you, Phil, and I hope you will choose to support the Liberal Democrats. On universal credit, I think it's an idea which made sense to try to simplify the system, but it hasn't had the resource put behind it. And so because it has been being used to cut the amount that was spent, we've had these sort of perverse outcomes. And I mean, I see this in my constituency surgeries, the people who have got a very strong case who, for whatever reason, are then being turned down. And then it goes to the mandatory reconsideration and appeal, and they get overturned. Now, I mean, you raise a good point about the people who are making those initial decisions as contractors. And I mean, the first thing I would say is not all of the apparent health professionals that are being used to adjudicate have a relevant qualification, and that should be something that we can change. And secondly, obviously no system is going to get every single decision right. I mean, we accept that, we have human beings and people make mistakes, but the percentage of decisions which are overturned on appeal is what is so worrying, because it means that, this is being got wrong very regularly. And there ought to be penalties and sanctions if you are going to have contractors doing this. And I'm not sure that's the best way forward. But if you are, you ought to be able to penalise those that make decisions that get overturned, because that's costing the taxpayer more and it's causing significant emotional distress for the people involved.
Labour policy on this is quite clear. They want to stop universal credit. Would you agree with that?
As I say, I think the principle of the system is not a bad one. So it needs more resource. It also needs changes, such as making sure that people can get their payments up front rather than this ridiculous kind of waiting time, and it needs to be much better managed. So yes, there'd be significant changes that need to be made to it.
Right, Phil, thank you. Let's go to Luke. He's back from Belfast. I hope it's a better line, Luke.
Yes, I hope so too. I'm a Liberal Democrat and Alliance member from Northern Ireland, and I would like to ask Jo what she would do to help resolve the political impasse in Northern Ireland if she became Prime Minister, which the current Secretary of State and the current PM have been so terrible at helping us with. And if she was Prime Minister, would she directly legislate for issues like same-sex marriage and abortion reform, which are so desperately needed in Northern Ireland and which the general public support?
So, I mean, in very quick answer, Luke, good to speak to you on the final point you raised. Then I do think on same-sex marriage and abortion reform, these are absolutely needed. The fact that people in Northern Ireland are basically being denied human rights on these issues,
but
I think is problematic.
Should the UK Parliament effectively take control of those issues?
I think on human rights issues that are fundamental, then yes, we should, because we have that responsibility. There's obviously that breakdown in power sharing, which is deeply worrying and not really helped by the current incumbent Secretary of State, who hasn't necessarily demonstrated perhaps the depth of understanding of the political situation in Northern Ireland that you might want. And I also think the confidence and supply arrangement with the DUP has been very destabilising, because it's placed the UK government in a situation where it's obviously depending on one side of the power sharing agreement. So, I mean, I think listening to people in Northern Ireland is a really important part of this. And I've also been in touch and looking forward to meeting up with Naomi Long, who of course is now Alliance MEP and was previously a member of the House of Commons. And I think that's a really positive development, to be able to find ways through this impasse, because, you know, for people like yourself, Luke, in Northern Ireland, you know, they want a government that can get on with things and not have this sort of complete breakdown.
Luke, thank you very much indeed. Quick Twitter question to finish off with from Splinter, who says, come on, ask her if she would join Schengen. Would you join Schengen?
I don't think we should, and that's the point. At the moment, we've got a deal as members of the EU that gives us opt-outs on these things. That's why it is such a good deal, and that's why I want to fight to keep that deal as members of the European Union with all of the benefits that it brings us.
Well, Jo, if you become leader of the Liberal Democrats, I hope you'll come back and take calls from our audience fairly regularly. Thank you very much indeed for joining us over the last hour. If you've missed any of our leadership interviews, they're all on the LBC website or on my website at iaindale.com, including last week's with Sir Ed Davey. And they're also on the Cross Question podcast feed if you just prefer to listen to them at your leisure rather than watch. I don't know why you would, but there we are. Right, coming up in the next hour, we are going to talk about the fact that today Sir Cliff Richard and Paul Gambaccini have launched a campaign aimed at persuading the government to change the law to make it illegal for the identity of people accused of sexual offences to be made public prior to them being charged. Now that sounds completely reasonable, doesn't it? But could there be unforeseen circumstances? 0345 6060 973. That's our phone in over the next hour. You're listening to LBC. It's 9 o'clock.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation.